My name is Daryl Carl. Thanks for joining us once again. Now, fuel and gas stations sited in residential or commercial locations across the country is not a breach of any law. That's the position of the Environmental Protection Agency in their first public statement since the Medina atomic gas tanker explosion that occurred over the weekend. Even before Cabinet takes a firm decision on how to introduce fresh reforms in the management of such facilities, the EPA is defending the existing situation where gas stations are allowed to operate within residential and commercial areas. Executive Director Peter Abumsako has been speaking at a news conference at the EPA headquarters.
The EPA is yet to conduct an investigation to come out with the cause of the incident and make recommendations to forestall such happenings. What does the law or guidelines say about situating an LPG gas refilling stations in residential areas? I believe that most people are concerned with this. Currently, there is no law in the country that spells it out clearly that fuel service and LPG refilling stations should not be sited in residential areas. However, the guidelines for the establishment and operations of these facilities indicated where these facilities can be sited. In the case of fuel filling stations, they can be sited in either commercial, mixed-used areas or residential areas. EPA's measures or plans are both externally and internally connected. Externally, EPA has resolved to work closely with all the stakeholders such as NPA, that is the National Petroleum Authority, Fire Service, Town and Country Planning Departments, Association of Oil Marketing Companies, and so on. Internally, the agency has constituted a technical team to review all applications from the regions to improve the quality assurance. Furthermore, staffing, expertise, resources required to do the work will be enhanced.
While still on this issue, the existing relevant policies are enough to avert explosions at gas stations only if they're well enforced. That's according to fire, risk and disaster management expert Kojo Denu, who says there may not be any need to formulate new policies in addressing the issue. He suggests if strict measures are put in place to enforce the existing regulations, some of these fire disasters can't be avoided. There's more in the following report.
The National Petroleum Authority, NPA, says it has stringent measures in place to forestall such disasters at fuel stations across the country. According to the Chief Executive, Alhassan Tampoli, the company where the fire started would not be spared if the final report of a recent evaluation exercise finds it culpable of violating the safety standards. Fire, risk and disaster management experts Kojo Denu indicates the disaster could have been averted if the NPA had acted differently.
There has to be a method statement as to how to go about, retrieving such a problem once it happens. When you have gas leak, what are the systems in place that you have to follow to make sure? Because from what happened, should we take it then that if there is another gas leak in any other station, then what they will do is just run out and leave the gas to, So these are some of the method statements that are very, very, very important. There are permit systems, worker height permit, work in confined area permit, working with hot work permits, and all these systems, they are in place. They are best practices. So that when there is going to be a delivery, there has to be a permit system. All the checks and measures have to be followed before you start with the delivery. And then once it's finished, what are the safety measures that you follow to make sure that the whole system has been put back to the safe order that it was.
President Akufo-Addo has indicated government's plans to institute a clear national policy to end such disasters. But Mr. Denu says the existing laws are enough to prevent further disasters only if they are well enforced.
If these risk assessments are brought in, it will allow such management systems to be audited, because you may have the management system, but then 3 months, 4 months, you've not really used the management system. And by using the management system, you have documentation, signages to prove that you are using the system. So if we carry out a risk assessment and it shows that you've not used the system, then it's always said that with every system, the human element is the weakest part of the chain. And that's where our management systems come into place. We may have the best policies and all that, but the implementations is always what the problem is, and there is room for improvement.
Some businesses affected by the disaster are, however, assured of some compensation by the National Disaster Management Organization, NADMO.
Commissioner of Insurance at the National Insurance Commission, Justice Yaofori, is calling for the amendment of the National Insurance Act to include all commercial properties rather than buildings only. The Act provides comprehensive provisions for the regulation of the insurance industry and for related matters. According to him, the current law regulating the industry fails to mention commercial properties for compulsory insurance as specified by the National Insurance Commission, hence the call. This call follows the recent fire disaster we've been talking about, which destroyed properties and claimed 7 lives.
Basically, what has happened actually increased the awareness of insurance. I believe a lot of those who probably experience the loss probably don't have any insurance. So far as insurance is concerned, those who have insurance, I believe they would contact the various insurers for the necessary investigation and then payment of claims. When you talk about commercial property, the law doesn't mention property, but it says commercial buildings. So assuming there's a filling station without a building, it doesn't qualify under the terms of a building. So the question is, can we compel them to buy the compulsory insurance? So maybe the Act actually needs to be amended to include commercial property, not only buildings. So in this case, anyone who runs a commercial private business will be compelled to buy some kind of insurance to protect themselves against liability to others.
But the question is, how come all this while we haven't been able to include the non-building, property and only buildings? Because we know there are some operations that necessarily doesn't need a building, but they are also commercial, they do commercial activities. How come this while?
Yeah, society and insurance, they're all dynamic. I believe insurance laws have evolved over the years. I believe when the great people came out with that act, they never had this in mind, that when they talk of property, building, they did not actually include property. So I believe the act can now be amended to include all properties, not only buildings, so far as commercial entities are concerned.
Okay. So how far with the campaign, the compulsory, insurance for this commercial properties campaign? I know you guys, started some campaign years back. I don't know how far you've gone with it. If you can give us an update.
Yeah, we continue to educate the public, but I think it's not enough. I don't think a lot of people in society are aware of the need to have compulsory fire insurance for private buildings that are used for businesses. So I think we still need to actually embark on more of public education. We've done some, but more needs to be done.
Okay. So one may ask that the smaller businesses over the place who have been affected one way or the other, do you have any plan for them, any package for them as we speak? Yeah,
there are various types of businesses that we have. We have micro insurance for even the lower income people. We also have the traditional insurance for bigger companies. So there are products. It's a matter of people being educated and people having confidence in insurance so that they can buy insurance for protection and peace of mind.
You are still watching Business Live. We want to bring you some other news we're following for you tonight. The country will record an average economic growth of almost 9% next year. That's according to the latest IMF Economic Outlook report, which was launched in Washington, D.C. Let's get more on this from my colleague George Afe, who is covering the IMF World Bank annual meetings there in Washington, D.C. George, what's the basis for this projection by the IMF?
Well, Darryl, just like what other international bodies have also said, it has to do basically with the fact that they're expecting oil production to pick up from next year. And that will have a great impact on the economy. So basically, Darryl, it has to do with the fact that oil is going to do very, very well. They're also expecting revenue to pick up. And that is the basis of this projection that we're going to see. There's almost a 9% growth in the economy. And if you do the analysis stretching back to previous years, until 2014, this would be the highest growth that we have reported for this year, Darryl.
And George, interesting, this is coming up after the assessment from Standard & Poor's. How do you connect the two?
Well, it's interesting because one thing that, Darryl, you can deduce from all these assessments is that all these agencies appear to be singing the same song. So all of them are saying that, well, it looks like revenue is indeed going to pick up. It looks like oil production is going to expand. And even for this year, they're also looking at about 6% economic growth rate for Ghana. So it means that maybe they are seeing something, doing their own extrapolations and all the rest, and they believe that growth will be bigger than even what government has estimated.
Okay, and so that was the IMF's projection for next year. But let's look at the economic performance for this year. What do they have to say about that?
Well, now they're also talking about some significant growth as well, looking at almost 6% growth, and that's the end of year target. Don't forget that somewhere around last year, we were in the range of about 3%. And so that is an over 100% jump in the economic growth rate for Ghana. Also interesting because what we're also picking up is that there could be some rebasing, and the economy might even be bigger than what we actually thought. And it could be more bigger again than what we have estimated. And what people will be asking is that what could be the implication of this with respect to the public debt, because the issue has come about because of the fact that the economy wasn't that big. So the bigger the economy, it means that the rate of respect to the size of our debt in relation to our economy might go down significantly, Darryl.
All right, and the projection of 9% sounds very good, actually. What do you think will be the impact of this verdict on our economy?
Well, for those investors out there, they take the report of the IMF very critical. Because if you're telling me that the economy is going to expand, there's going to be more economic activities here in Ghana, it means that when I invest in the country, the returns might be good. So what this could do is that it could impact on FDIs and for those who want to invest in the country, because if the economy is going to expand than what we thought initially, it means that the returns on investment might also be good, Darryl. And therefore, we could see a pickup in FDI in the country going forward into next year. Don't forget the recent aid-loss ruling as well. We hear that more oil companies could be coming in. So this could attract more big businesses to come in and invest in the country because of the fact that the economy might expand than what we are looking to. There will be more expansion, there will be more economic activities here in Ghana. And therefore, if they invest in Ghana, returns might be good.
All right, George Afe, thanks for the updates. We'll certainly be getting back to you with the latest from Washington, D.C. as and when we have it. But like you heard me talking to George, ratings agency Standard & Poor's has revised the outlook on Ghana's credit worthiness to positive from stable. The The move was influenced by measures that government is currently implementing to strengthen public finances. The development could impact positively on the country's cost of borrowing and even businesses. Well, economist Professor Godfrey Bokwin, who is also in Washington, D.C., tells Joy Business government still needs to do more to sustain this assessment.
The international community, a rating agency, would set credibility, raising the outlook, which probably indicate that their next major rating will see a significant improvement. I think it's good for Ghana in our bid to generate market confidence. I think what is also important is that they are also beginning to see, consistent with what we have also observed, that the economy is beginning to respond to the various policy initiatives and the overall government strategy. But I think what is also important for all of us to know is that it's early days yet. It's too early to begin to say that we have arrived. The recovery is still slow. There are still threats, downside risk to our recovery. Debt to GDP ratio is still an issue. Debt servicing to revenue ratio is still an issue. But I think what is also good is that, of course, it should build the confidence of government and enable them to continue on the path that they have chosen. Because when you begin to see these early dividends, it also gives you a positive feedback that, of course, you are implementing something that is getting results and all of that. So I think it's quite good. What is important for all of us is to also understand that the growth that S&P is talking about is not really, it's not the ultimate. It's not growth that we can all be proud of, and I think it's something that government will have to take another look at. It's growth that is driven by hydrocarbon production. It will get to a point, and we cannot go beyond that. Okay, but that growth is not inclusive as well. So how do we engineer growth that will be driven by the labor sub-intensive sectors of the economy? At least I can sympathize with government in terms of planting for food and job and all of that. How do we link this to industrialization, agribusiness, and all of that to ensure that growth is much more broad-based, that also narrows the income inequality, that rope in a lot of Ghanaians, female participation in that growth process, and how do we also ensure effective redistribution of that growth or that wealth? I think these are issues that we want to be able to address in the medium to the long term also.
Let's turn to energy issues now. The Ministry of Energy says it will grant some incentives to lure investors to invest in the renewable energy sector. So far, renewable energy contributes only 1%, yes, 1% to the national grid. Deputy Minister of Energy, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, at the 3rd Annual Ghana Renewable Fair, stated the desire of government to shore up the contribution of renewable energy to 15% of the nation's energy mix.
Electricity currently reaches 85% of the population, with 15% of the rest in darkness. According to the Ministry of Energy, several of these areas will be too expensive to reach, but the question remains how wide the coverage of renewable energies are in the country. Less than 1% of renewable energy is fed into the national grid. By 2020, it is expected to reach some 10%. Deputy Minister of Energy, Mohammed Amin, says the current Renewable Energy Act will not be enough to push for this agenda.
We have identified a number of challenges that have constrained the actual realization of renewable energy power plants. And some of these constraints, which were identified at the time the Renewable Energy Act was passed, must be addressed in order to ensure the full realization of the potential before us. Government is determined to amend the Act to further address some of these outstanding constraints and also to provide opportunity for including competitive tendering procurement of renewable energy as a provision in this Act.
One of these incentives is the obligatory purchase, provision. By obligatory purchase provision, it means that you may not even need a power purchase agreement to be able to sell the power you produce from renewable sources. It is a law. The Renewable Energy Act provides that once you produce, from renewable energy, the off-taker, the distributor of power, ECG in our case, must buy it. Okay, that is one incentive. The other incentive is the import exemption on the materials that are brought in for assembling renewable energy solutions. That is another important. And then we also have the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff is the tariff that is set above the normal cost of power from conventional sources.
An MOU signed with the government of Germany will be one of the several government-to-government and private sector support pushing forward the agenda. So far, the German government has set aside 100 million euros for 2017 to support the private sector to invest in renewable energy.
Germany will commit up to 100 million euros in 2017. The bilateral reform partnership aims at a privately driven expansion of renewable energy in Ghana. Germany and Ghana agreed to focus in particular on strengthening competition in power generation and to make the renewable energy sector a shining example in order to reduce cost of generation, to introduce open and competitive bidding, and to get, in the end, the best value for the money invested.
Still on energy, the ministry says it will cancel past power purchase agreements entered into by the ECG while it postpones others to 2025. These statements were made at the third Renewable Energy Fair organized by the Energy Commission.
Time to bring you our interview of the day, and developers of the National Digital Address System, Vodacom, have confirmed their readiness to launch the digital addressing system with over 16 billion unique addresses. The addressing system is part of the institutional reforms by government aimed at improving business registration and other business-related activities such as bank borrowing. The chief executive of Vodacom, Nana Osei-Frifa, has been explaining how the system will work once launched.
Interview of the day.
We are very ready. We have been for a very long time. As we've always said, we are very excited about this project, and we have been very, very ready. Now, we are working very closely with Ghana Post to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and to push the final few days towards the final launch. So yes, we are ready. The software, we have given Ghana Post the first batch of the software. We are in customization mode where we are changing a few things to let it take on the shape and form that Ghana Post want it to be, because let's not forget that even though we have developed as a CGPS, it is still a Ghana Post product, so we are handing it over to Ghana Post with the various customizations, and then beyond that we go out and roll out to the whole nation, big and very big, I mean.
Now, can you tell us how exactly is this thing going to be done? The codification method, whether it's going to be physical, how exactly is going to be rolled out, and how different it would be from the former PO box and stuff that we were accustomed to?
These addresses will be addresses that will lead to your house or your workplace. So no more PO boxes leading to just post offices. These are leading directly to where you live. Now, for all of Ghana, we have codified the entire nation into a grid of 5 meters by 5 meters squared across the whole nation, every square inch of the nation. In total, we have generated 16.1 billion unique addresses and given each one of these 16.1 billion a digital address. So wherever you are, we have written the software to be able to find every space, every space in this country has been codified and addressed. And so it doesn't matter where you are, we will be able to find you. Now, because this is digital, that's why we are calling it digital, it has been integrated with the online space. And so when you give your address, people can actually use the application to find you. So wherever you are, we have integrated with the various mapping applications, Google Maps, OpenStreet, and so many of these mapping applications. So wherever you are, once you put in your address, you'll be able to say navigate to this place, and it will show you the route that takes you there, and it will do your turn left, turn right, go straight until you get to the specific destination that was given in the digital address.
Interview of the day.
MyJoyOnline.com/business is the website to visit to get updated on all the business news stories we have been reporting plus others. My name is Daryl Kaldabid for Business Live. We are back tomorrow.